Hello, everybody. Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I'm Andy Signore, and Kathleen Kennedy's back in the news with Rise of Skywalker coming out. She's doing the rounds of the press, and she gave an interview to Rolling Stone that I see a lot of people talking about, saying she's crazy, she should be fired. Look, I don't disagree. I have clear issues with Kathleen Kennedy, but I thought let's try and step back. Let's step back for a second. I know people want to already kill me for even suggesting it. Let's hear her words and see how much worse it is, or does she have some points? Let's try and look at this from a perspective of humanness, and does she have some points, or if she doesn't? And I've already glossed over a bit, and I think she doesn't for a bunch of it. But let's go through this together, because I think it's important to look at this article and try and really read this together. With a little bit of a common sense. So she does this. It's a big interview. Talks about Colin Trevorrow and how he didn't. Why did you bring back JJ? Was this a hard nut to crack? Every one of these movies is a particularly hard nut to crack. There's no source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-page novels. We don't have anything other than passionate storytelling. Storytellers who got together and talk about what the next iteration might be. Let's pause right there. There's no comic books? Dude, there's tons of comic books. You cut it all out with the extended universe. And I didn't read it all, but I know the fans are pissed because you got rid of it all. There's tons of old Knights of the Old Republic. There's old video games. There's tons of comics that people loved. And you could have just gone back and adapted some of it and said, and sure, maybe you made it not canon, but make it canon now. Bring some of it back. What do you mean there's no comic books to adapt? It just shows she's kind of clueless. What do you mean there's nothing to adapt? There's no source material. What? I mean, I guess she's saying, oh, we're not just adapting a book, but you have to pick which things to do. She has a point of there's a lot to grab from. What do you grab? But there's plenty of source material. I don't know what you're talking about. They're all grabbing from source material of what's his name? I'm forgetting his name. Dave Filoni, of course. He's grabbing stuff all the time. So I don't know. This is weird. Anyway, let's keep going. We don't have anything other than passionate storytellers. We go through a really normal development process. You start by talking to filmmakers who exhibit the sensibilities that you're looking for, and I would argue that list is very small. I agree with her on that. Who know how to handle a Star Wars and Kathleen Kennedy and everything that comes with it, and Bob Iger. All these things are part of that dealing with this sort of machine. So we try to be as thoughtful because it even says the ability to handle how enormous a job these movies are. That is true. Let's not ignore that. So we try to be as thoughtful as we possibly can about making those choices. I would also argue that sometimes people get involved in the normal development process and then they realize, oh my God, this is so much more than I ever imagined. So it's pretty common that when you're working on movies, you're not making choices and decisions that necessarily work out exactly the way you want from the get-go. So look, she's on the defensive here because this is the biggest criticism that I think everybody has against her. Why would you be hiring so many different people, especially these huge talented writer-directors who can do any project, really any studio in town, come on over, work for us. How do you not get better at sort of knowing which ones are going to have the same mentality as you? How do you not get better at sort of getting to a point where you know they're going to sort of bow down to you and let you be the boss, or sort of telling them that so they come in knowing look, I'm going to want to be in control of this. There's just a way to work with people and be a proper boss that can actually work with creatives and people who have sort of visions and being honest about how much their vision is going to be allowed to get through. So this doesn't read well. It reads defensively. So again, it's her on the defensive trying to justify, I think, the biggest complaint. It's been an evolving process with lots of people and lots of opinions, and then you try to shape something into what eventually becomes what it becomes. So I feel really fortunate that I've worked with so many great people that have absolutely committed, JJ being one of them. He's a huge fan, incredibly passionate. I'm sure they paid him a mint to come do that, because who else is going to do it? That can deal with her, that she can say no to. There's just politics that goes both ways, and JJ's earned a little bit of of course, I think he's listening to her. He's not telling her to go to hell, but it's a back and forth. We got to know who's in charge. And she's clearly in charge by name, but Bob Iger's really in charge, and the shareholders are really in charge. JJ's a huge fan, incredibly passionate about Star Wars, and has been from the moment I sat talking about this with him. The more he got involved, the more excited he became. So I think if you asked him today, or probably wishes he'd been in a situation where he could have done all three, that would have been nicer. I think for sure Last Jedi would have been better. I do believe so. But as I said, these are huge projects, so it's very difficult unless there's 3 or 4 years in between. It's not really physically possible. That's fair. It's true. It does take a long time. But at the same time, I think Disney could have slowed down the roll. They could have figured out a way to stretch this out and make sure that the movie was good, or wait for JJ and let them come out. We've waited years for a new trilogy. They don't need to come out all the time. Look at Avatar. It doesn't mean it's doing well, but movies can sometimes take a while. Wonder Woman's taken a little bit. I mean, some movies just take a while to make sequels come out. Do them right. Don't rush them out. And don't just keep firing directors. So again, defensive. Very interesting to see how that worked. What strikes you about how when he is screenwriter? Talk about Chris Terrio, who did Justice League as well, or at least the first draft that got no approval. Not only so it goes on and talks about how JJ really knew the deep dive of Star Wars, etc., and was because he did Force Awakens. It's almost like an education, getting acquainted with all the aspects of Star Wars. Not only just looking at the movies, but talking to a number of people who are still around who worked for George for years. Again, making it clear George isn't there giving notes anymore, like people are saying. He's not. The mythology he created. One of the things we talk about all the time is the fact that it was very important to George that these stories really meant something, that they have to say something, that they have real to emotional core. So we spend a lot of time talking about that and trying to find the spine of a story that feels satisfying. When you're dealing with something where you don't necessarily have any of the source material, you could have, then you're looking for a filmmaker who has a strong point of view. Amen. That's what's been lacking, and you haven't found that, Kathleen Kennedy. Someone who can find themselves in the characters and the story, that's what drives the momentum of storytelling. I mean, let's step back. Again, trying to be objective here. Rian Johnson did that, and we didn't like it. So it seems like maybe they did give him his vision, and they let him go there, and it was a miss. And I'd rather them try and go for a vision than not. And so as much as I don't like Last Jedi, and we all do, she has a point. Whether that actually is true or not is obviously up for debate. So JJ's really fun in the room. Yeah, we know that. We love JJ. How do you feel like when you get to the point we've got this with the story of episode 9? Well, I wouldn't say we ever got to the point where you're just like, that's it. It's a constantly evolving process. I mean, there's still little things that we're trying to get exactly right now. You never stop the storytelling iterations that go into making these movies, but we know that what the previous 8 movies are. We know that what the story is. So in this movie, we're talking about what's come before, and we're trying to find a satisfying conclusion. And I think we have, and that's something we can only depend on our instincts to arrive at, whether we have not to. And then we have what I would call the family and friends that you pull in and show things when you try to get some kind of feedback. Again, not test screenings, notice. Not test screenings. They don't do test screenings. But yeah, of course they show friends and bring in, Filoni and other people who are like in the Favreau scene. Of course you bring in your friends, the people that are trusted sources to sort of give feedback. You have to when you're making a creation like this. But you don't give it to the masses and complete strangers. Disney can't afford to do that right now. It's too big of a property. So you show these people for feedback to see if it's making sense and that you're delivering on the things that you intend. That's something that we're doing right now. So right now they're clearly showing that they're not having 3 cuts and doing test screenings and all the nonsense that's out there. It's not about sources, it's just about common sense. It just doesn't make sense given the history of Star Wars and what people actually working on the show, hence sources might be better than others, would say. Anyway, I digress there. Rian Johnson's made some controversial choices in The Last Jedi, especially considering its dramatic purpose as the second movie in a trilogy. Where were you? Were you, to an extent, deliberately trying to challenge fans and their expectations? We definitely did. We were talking all the time about how we move Star Wars forward and how we keep it relevant. Obviously, we don't want to just keep making the same movie over and over again. So I agree with you. I mean, I love what Rian did. It's an absolutely wonderful film. I think he's an extraordinary filmmaker, and I really appreciate the bold moves that he did make. The bold moves. I guess you could say they're bold moves. I think people forget that, especially when you're doing a trilogy structure. The first movie is setting things up. The second is usually the conflict. And the third is the resolution. Again, she's being defensive. So you're bound to have that second movie, much the same way Empire Strikes Back was probably the darkest and most dramatic of the 3. The conflict. What was the conflict in Last Jedi? Well, tell me, what was it? What was it? What? There wasn't one. It was stupid. Half the plots didn't even make sense. It was a complete waste of time. And then they wasted Mark Hamill. That was the conflict? No. That's not. We've been waiting for Luke, and that's what we got? No. We talked about it with Indiana Jones. We did Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we did Temple of Doom, which was dark and created a lot of controversy. And people were surprised when we went with the storytelling. But frankly, that's the whole point. She sounds like she's trying to win a nerd war. Am I crazy? Like she's came in with this evidence. It's like she thought about it. Kathleen, you should talk about how the Indiana Jones trilogy. The second one was dark. Last Jedi wasn't dark. That wasn't the problem. Last Jedi was nonsensical and just took a dump on a lot of the things that we wanted and then didn't really go anywhere. It didn't serve much of a purpose. That's the problem. That's not dark. So her justifying this is getting me angry because, It doesn't make sense. And I do believe any other sort of executive would have been fired at this point, clearly, and they're not firing her. I don't know why. I'm not going to say it's sexist. It's like other people are saying. Just, it is what it is. It's complicated. She's a respected person who's worked with Lucas, Spielberg, and you really got to make sure you've given her every rope you can to hang herself versus fire her. So I understand why it's complicated for do it, but the results have made a lot of money. But they haven't sold merchandise, and they aren't getting people excited. Bob Iger has to say, yeah, we're pausing on Star Wars. That's a bad thing. Iger saying Favreau is now a part and going to be heavily involved moving forward. That's not a good thing for Kathleen Kennedy. So she's in defensive mode trying to win a nerd war here. And so far, she's on the ropes, and I don't think she's winning. I love that we have these amazing, passionate fans who care so much. No, she does not. She hates some of these fans so much. I know sometimes they may think we don't listen, but we do. And I thought it was fantastic that people got that engaged. It just showed me and everybody that they care. And that's important for us all. Of course we care. We really look at them and as the custodians of this story as much as we are. We look at it like a kind of partnership. Oh, no, they don't. No, they don't. No, you don't. You have your own vision and you're going with what you want. And you're right. It's your property, but and it's also, you can't please all the fans. So don't give me this lip service of we're trying to listen to the fans. No, you aren't. You're trying to listen to some fans, the fans that you agree with. That's the truth. You can't please everybody, but you're saying you're trying to please everybody, and that's, just own it. Just own it. Just like at least DC fans, and I can argue now, looking back on it, at least Snyder had a vision. I don't like it, but I respect the guy for having a vision at least. The hell is this new vision? I think JJ had one, and I'm sad he left in the middle, and it might be too late to fix it, but I don't think Ryan Johnson just had a completely different vision that was on nobody's wavelength, and that's the problem. And I think diehard Star Wars fans just don't care. They'll see anything and love it because it has Star Wars on it. But I think some of us are being a little bit more critical. Also, this is the community we live in. We're more critical to movies and stuff nowadays, which can sometimes be annoying. Here it is. And then they ask about, what's next? When this movie comes out, certainly whether this movie comes out after this, whatever movie comes after this, it's unconnected to the Star Wars Skywalker saga. That's one of the biggest challenges in the history of the franchise. Until now, pretty much everything has been in some way connected to the original story. What are your thoughts? It's an incredible challenge, and it is something that we're in the middle of. And I can't even begin to tell you where this may end up, because she doesn't know. Or she's not saying, but it seems like she doesn't have approval, is what this reads to me. Because I think you were absolutely right. I think whatever the next movie is and how it begins is to find a new way forward. It's something we want to take plenty of time and conversation and careful thought before deciding exactly what we're going to do. Safe answer. It's probably a true answer. So you haven't decided on what's next. No, we've got various things we're looking at and various ways in which we can begin or not. As you can imagine, do you go back? Do you go forward? All these questions are being asked. Do you stay in this galaxy? Do we go to another galaxy? The universe is never ending. Ha ha ha. The good news and the bad news. They have endless possibilities. It's liberating, it's exciting, and it creates a lot of pressure and anxiety as well. Look, that's the first honest thing she said. And I wish she'd also just added, you know what? Sometimes I just don't even know. Because the fans are so polarizing, they're so crazy. How do we please them all? I don't know. It's becoming a chore because every Star Wars fan has their own view of what Star Wars is. How the hell do you continue this and keep going unless you're George Lucas, who the fans will disrespect because they'll say, well, it's his trilogy, he can do what he wants. It's not Kathleen Kennedy's trilogy, movie, saga, anything. It's not even Disney's. They just bought it. And so until we have someone else who can step in and we can respect and say, yes, I trust your vision, let's go. They're going to have this trouble. And I don't think Kathleen Kennedy's earning any respect with all the filmmakers she's having trouble with. Right or wrong, it's a bad look. And Lord and Miller might have made a terrible Solo. Who knows? To be honest, who knows? Probably wasn't the right sensibility. The question is, why were they making a Solo movie to begin with? And if they were doing it because Lord and Miller had some, eccentric version to do, you got to then just lean in it and bet on it, or don't do it. To do like the Lord Miller comedy and then have Ron Howard come in with the safe thing, like that's the problem. Everything has been safe. She doesn't know how to take the risks. And then she let Ryan Johnson take risks, and they were just like, what are these? These aren't good risks. These are just dumb. That's the state. For me, that's where we are. Obviously, you might disagree. I want to have the dialogue. Tell me down below, civilly, please. How does Marvel's Kevin Feige come into the mix? Kevin has been a huge fan of Star Wars. He's made that pretty clear. And I think when we went off to do a couple Star Wars movies, he realized he could step in and out of what he's specifically doing with just Marvel. He talked to us, not just her, Iger. Got to remember, there's someone she has a boss. He talked to the studio and said, he talked to the studio. See? He's not talking to her. She's in charge of Star Wars. He went above her and said, is there any chance I could step in and do one of those Star Wars movies? And I thought it was a pretty cool idea. So we're just beginning to talk about what that might be and when that might be, but it's ways off. So look, of course you have to be nice. You can't be like, I didn't want him to do it. That would be the worst move she could do. She has to support him. He's rock star there. But I can read between the lines. He talked to us. He talked to the studio. He was asking around, and clearly it got to her of, let's let Feige try one. He really wants to do one. You know what? Let him try one because we need him to be happy. And you're not doing so well, so maybe pay attention to what he's doing. I'm sure that was the meaning. Have you thought about how much longer you'd like to keep doing what you're doing? I've really enjoyed this. I have to say, it's been incredibly exciting. And just the fact that George asked me to do this. She's winning a nerd war. She's dropping the I know George Lucas card. Look at this. I felt tremendous responsibility with stepping in and taking care of this franchise. And if there was going to be new movies, to really put a team around this that cared as much as I did. What happens in the future and how long and how much longer I do this, I don't know yet. I'm looking at all of it. It's been incredibly. She doesn't know yet because she doesn't know yet. Because she doesn't know if she's quitting, which is a bad look. Because what job is she going to get? Or are they going to let her go? She doesn't. I believe that wholeheartedly. I'm looking at all of it. It's been incredibly satisfying to reach the point where you've completed the saga, and I think we made a really wonderful movie. It's going to feel very satisfying to the audience, so that's what I'm focused on right at the moment, and what the future holds. Who knows? Thanks to Bob Iger's new book, we know that George Lucas had some dissatisfaction with Force Awakens. What are your feelings about that? Since she dropped the George Lucas card, let's find out. Personally, I've had a relationship with George going back to all of us meeting before Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's not a name drop. That's fair. She did hear it. It's fair because he asked. So this is a long 35 plus years that I've known George, and I continue to be very good friends with George. And I think there's plenty of examples where people create something that's fundamental who they are, where it's difficult letting go and watching that become something different. So I think initially that was difficult for George. I think this is fair to say. It's a little off. Why even talk about it? Let him talk about it. I don't think he anticipated how hard it would be. And JJ came in with such enthusiasm and frankly reverence for Star Wars and for George and had to find what was personal for him. He had to make it his own. Every director who comes onto a movie has to make something their own. They have to find themselves in the storytelling, and that's going to be a different point of view. And I think that all was what George was reacting to. It's probably fair. He may not agree with every choice JJ made. He may not agree with every choice Ryan made, but he appreciates the filmmaking. I know he so appreciates, for instance, what ILM does, the visual effects arm. He has the work on those movies, the company he created. It's just continually he's telling me how astounded he is by how far things have come and how much whatever comes in your mind can be achieved. He came down, for instance, on The Mandalorian to see what we're doing. And he's worked a long time with director Dave Filoni, and he's known Jon Favreau. He has just like a little kid on that set when he was watching what we were doing. Yeah, because it felt like Star Wars finally. So I see a guy caught up in this, and I think there's a little bit of regret that he's not on the stage directing movies and still in it still. And that may filter into it as well. So she's even saying, oh, yeah, he just misses directing. He's just all retired, getting tired. That's kind of, why reveal this? But I know he's very proud of what he created, and to see people go and enjoy his now almost 2020 is pretty remarkable. Is there any universe where George can be lured back to do a one-off? I doubt it, but listen, I think that would be fantastic. If he would be interested in doing that again, but I doubt it. He's loving doing his museum. He's doing this narrative art museum in Los Angeles. That's a huge project, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. So it's really keeping engaged in storytelling. I think he's loving that, and he's loving his little girl, 6-year-old Everest, so he's pretty fulfilled. There you go. That's the whole article, breaking it down honestly. Kathleen Kennedy, look, I respect her. We all should respect her. She's made some fantastic projects. She's worked with some incredible people. And this task of doing Star Wars, it is hard. It's hard because it's a new political climate we live in. Everyone's got to be a little nicer and more respectful, which I support. But it's parlaying into Hollywood, and that's pissing certain people off. And then they're disrespecting the characters of certain people, and then other people are happy with it, so you just listen to them. It blows my mind to even try and consider doing something like this, and none of us could handle it. So it's unfair to completely pile on her, and I do think she's handling it pleasantly. She's trying to be civil about it. But you can read between the lines there and see some things that clearly she's sort of, I think, showing. But I think just bashing her completely is unfair. She does need to step up and figure out some people. And I think this news of Favreau, and I've heard Filoni, also Dave Filoni coming in to get more involved in the live action end, I don't know why she didn't do that sooner. Jon Favreau wasting time on Lion King and it made money for them, so good. He's on their good graces. I want to see them sort of do what they're doing with Mandalorian with other stories and find other directors who are going to actually invest a few years to develop something really cool, who come in with a pitch that we're like, yes, you know what? That's exciting. That's what we need to work on. That's where Star Wars needs to go. What do you guys think? Hit me up on social media at Andy Signore on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Leave your comments down below and tune in tonight for a special Nerd Wars announcement at 10:30 this Thursday. It's not typical as usual. We're typically Tuesday to Thursday, but we had a guest have to reschedule. We are going to be doing a special episode to make up for it tomorrow night at 9 p.m. with the amazing Lucas and Den of Nerds. You're not going to miss it. It's a Marvel topic, so stay tuned for that. Hit subscribe and stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.